Okay, so the title of the message this morning is No, I Am Not a Robot. No, I Am Not a Robot. And a little subtitle there is I Am Fearfully and Wonderfully Made. I am not a robot. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I want to put it to you this morning that we, as human beings, are not the result of some freak explosion that people call the Big Bang Theory. In fact, there's not only one Big Bang Theory, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of Big Bang theories. Scientists cannot even agree as to what the Big Bang Theory should actually be and represent. But there are those who believe that we're the result of this freak explosion they call the Big Bang Theory. But I want to say, not only are we not that, but neither are we the result of a freak process that they call evolution. But that each of us were created and are created and designed with purpose and for purpose. We are not here by accident. We are not here as the result of some freak event or freak occurrence over millions of years. We are here on purpose and with purpose because we have been created by a God who has declared, I know the plans I have for you. And he says those plans are to prosper you and not to harm you. Those plans are to do you good. They're to give you hope and to give you a future. Some people say that they are so much enjoying their lives that they don't want to become Christians. Well, I can understand it if you're looking at the wrong type of Christian. Sometimes we give the wrong impression as to what Christianity is like. It's not about pretending that everything's okay. Neither is it about moaning and groaning and always complaining. But the God that we serve is a God who does not want to rob us of fun, of joy, of gladness. He wants to turn our mourning into dancing that we sung about this morning. And he wants to give us hope and give us a future. He wants to cause us and enable us to prosper and not to harm us. And that's the God who has created us on purpose and with purpose. You know, we might be similar to each other, and we are. We're all similar to each other, but you'll be glad to know that none of us are exactly the same. So you can turn to the person next to you if you want and say to him, you know, we might be similar, but thank God we're not exactly the same. And they might be more thankful when they look at you that that's the truth. Amen, Sylvia. Keep it up, love. A couple of verses in Genesis chapter 1 and also Psalm 139 come on the screen there, if you can see them. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And then Psalm 139, verse 14, David says, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Fearfully and wonderfully made. What does David mean by fearfully and wonderfully made? When he uses those two words, incredible words, but what does David mean by fearfully and wonderfully? Well, fearfully, when translated from Hebrew, and David spoke in Hebrew. David did not speak in the old King James English. David did not speak with the modern English language, whether it's the British English or whether it's the American English. David spoke in Hebrew. He wrote the Psalms, most of the Psalms in Hebrew. He sang in Hebrew. And so when he used the word fearfully, translated from Hebrew, the word fearfully literally means with great reverence and great respect. We often talk about fearing God, to fear God. What does fear God mean? Does that mean you should find a corner and cower away and hide from him? It's not what that means. It's not how God wants us to fear him. To fear God means to reverence him and to respect him, to acknowledge who he is, and ultimately to serve him. That's what it means to fear God. When you fear an opponent, if you're afraid of that opponent, then you're probably almost beat before you start. But if you respect that opponent, then you can recognize the qualities, the giftings, the abilities they have, and be prepared for it and be prepared to go against that opponent. But when it comes to fearing God, it's to reverence him and to respect him. Wonderfully, when translated from Hebrew, means unique and set apart. We are, yeah, it's you, Sylvia. That dentist did those teeth well. I'll tell you, brilliant. They're working well this morning, praise God. But we are unique. We are set apart. You know, I often hear people, even news reporters and so on, who maybe have some of the top qualifications when it comes to English language and so on. And you hear them saying things like, well, that's more unique than that. And I'm thinking, there's no such thing as more unique. You cannot be more unique. Unique is a word that stands on its own. You cannot be more unique than the person beside you. You're unique. You're different. That's it. We are all unique. We're all set apart. So we're all special. And so the Bible shows that rather than us being the result of some freak event or being the result of some freak occurrence, that we were created by God with great reverence and great respect, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And why do I say that I am not a robot? Well, because I'm not. None of us are. But you know that there are websites, when you go onto them and you're trying to buy something, that very often you have to prove you're not a robot before you can check out. How many of you have had that experience? Come on, you're on, like at least half the people here. You're on a website and you want to check out, and then you're told before you buy this thing, you have to prove that you're not a robot. I don't know what they've got against robots. I mean, if a robot come into our coffee shop when it opens again in 1 or 2 weeks' time, and if a robot come into our coffee shop to buy a coffee, do you think we're going to refuse it? Come on, someone wants to buy a coffee, let them buy the coffee. If a robot comes on a website to buy a shirt, let the robot buy the shirt. But the way you prove you're not a robot, this is what they ask you to do. They give you images, and then they tell you to prove you're not a robot, then select the images that have, let's say, bridges on each of these squares. So you have to click the squares that have a bridge on them. So you're going to tell me that a robot that's clever enough to get onto your website and order a shirt for itself is not clever enough to be able to pick out the bridges? That's what happens. And so websites don't want to sell shirts to robots. But then there's another problem. Recently, Professor Brian Cox, he's the up-and-coming professor in the UK, possibly worldwide. And he's done a program. It's probably already out. You'll be able to get it and download it. But in it, he's talking about black holes. And Professor Brian Cox said a lot of people listen to him. He said recently that he believes that we might all be holograms. Not robots, but we are holograms. So what's a hologram, I hear you asking? What's a hologram? A hologram, next image please, a hologram is an image that is reflected on the glass. If you watch Pointless, in the program Pointless, they're given the little trophy at the end. It's a hologram. It's an image on glass. You can get a photograph put onto glass. We have one, Kathleen and I were in Nice a number of years ago, and we have a hologram of us on this glass image. And you can turn it around, look at the side of it, you see the face side on and so on. But when it comes to moving images on reflected glass, these moving images, these holograms give the impression of life. So it's not an image on a screen like you're seeing now. It's an image on glass that could be in the middle of a stage like this, and it gives the impression that the person speaking or singing is alive or is right there on the stage. I think the first one, or one of the first ones, was Les Dawson. I think he did a program for about an hour. He was dead. But he was on the stage and people had paid and filled the place. They paid to come in to hear Les Dawson telling these jokes. And of course, there was one of Michael Jackson, and there have been many, many, many others. And so Professor Brian Cox is now saying that as a result of his studies of black holes, that he believes that we're all holograms. Amen. Now, Christians get laughed at and get ridiculed because we believe in God and because we believe in creation. We get laughed at and ridiculed because we believe that God said, and it was so. But the weird thing is that we're being laughed at and ridiculed by people who believe that we're holograms. By those who believe that we arrived on planet Earth 300 million years ago as some kind of intergalactic bacteria. Or that we're the result of an explosion. I don't know how many explosions you've ever witnessed in Northern Ireland. We've witnessed so many in the past. Been right there, seen it happen in front of our eyes. I've never yet seen an explosion that has created anything. And we've been laughed at and ridiculed because we say we believe in God, we believe in creation. And yet there are those who say we're here by the result of this Big Bang theory, from which they say the universe appeared, and one of the rocks that appeared, they say came out of, anything that appeared came out of nothing. There was nothing. But then nothing exploded, and nothing became something. And one of the great balls of molten rock that we now call Earth, that later, and when we say later, we mean millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of years later, is what they say. That this molten rock cooled down. And then at some point it began to rain. Where the rain came from, we don't know, unless you read Genesis chapter 6 and so on. And you'll see where the rain came from. But they say that it began to rain on this molten rock, and that it enabled and helped this molten rock to cool down. And because the rain that persisted, much of the rock turned to mud, and much of the planet became what they call mud soup, and then life was formed, they say, in the slime. And from that slime and from the life that started within that slime came all of life that we now see and witness on planet Earth. Because that's the origin, they tell us, including human life. And so they want to know that we're not a robot before they can sell us a shirt. But it seems like they're not concerned if you're a hologram, because the world is going to swallow this. Or if you believe in any of the other nonsense, like we're descendants from intergalactic bacteria, or that we're slime balls that crawled out of the mud soup. But when you look around, you might think, well, that might be true as far as that. But here's the point. Here's the point I want to make. We live in a world that's focused on robots and holograms and clones and clowns. But I want to say this morning very clearly from this platform that we are none of these things. The next slide, please. We are none of these things, but that we are those who were created in the image and the likeness of God. We're not embarrassed to say that we believe what the Bible tells us. We're not embarrassed to say that this has been proved and tested. And the evidence of this is not just a historical thing, but it's an ongoing thing, because some of you would not be here today had it not been for the fact that a living God has turned your circumstances around and has done something miraculous in your life. That's the evidence that sits here today. We are those who were created in the image and the likeness of God. Created to be like Him, created to reflect Him, created to know Him, and created to fellowship with Him. It's amazing. The problem was that whenever Adam and Eve had been created, and without getting into the whole details of the creation story and the fall of humanity, the devil convinced Eve that something was missing. How sad when someone has everything that they think that something's missing. And yet the devil convinced Eve that something was missing. She then convinced Adam to do as she had done. And he bit. Literally, he bit. And that was the start of all of our problems on planet Earth. Now, if they had been robots or holograms, they'd have been programmed to obey every instruction that God had given to them. But they were created, as we are, with the ability to choose. And so from that moment on, everything went downhill. From that moment, everything took a dive. Everything went downhill. And soon, next slide please, soon we get to Genesis chapter 6. And we get to the story of Noah. In Genesis 6 and verse 5, we're told that the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. But thank God for verse 8. But Noah found favor. The word grace found favor in the eyes of the Lord. All it took was one person to convince another person that something was missing. That's all it took to bring about the fall of humanity. And while the response was not good, and we still live with the consequences of that response, it proved at least one thing, that humans are not robots. But sadly, it led to what the Bible calls sin. And again, we shouldn't apologize for using the word sin these days. But it led to what the Bible calls sin. And it led to wickedness filling the earth in such a short space of time in the days of Noah. Remember what Jesus says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. As it was in the days of Lot, when love was not love. It was just perversion. As it was in the days of Noah, as it was in the days of Lot. But everything went downhill. Humanity became evil and corrupt, and they became rebellious towards God. Everyone, thank God, but Noah. Noah found grace. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, because Noah refused to fit in. Amen. Noah refused to fit with the mold that had already developed and established on planet Earth at that particular time. No one knew who he was in God. No one knew that God, the Creator, had created him. No one knew that he was accountable to God, his Creator. And with the choice that God had enabled him to have, Noah chose to serve God. But thank God it didn't stop even there. Because even after him, we're going to finish soon, but even after there was Abraham, who became the friend of God. There was Moses, who became a prophet of God and a deliverer of the people of God. There was Joshua and Caleb, who were among those who came out of Egypt and who were 2 of the 12 spies that went to spy out the land of Canaan. And then when they returned, they didn't fit in with the other 10, that they stood apart from them. And they said, we can do this, we can do this. They weren't prepared to fit the mold of the 10 and of those who would be more willing to listen to the 10 than listen to Joshua and to Caleb. Then there was Gideon and there was Deborah, who were not content to do what everyone else was doing. What was everyone else doing? You read in the book of Judges, they were all doing what was right in their own eyes. They were not doing what was right according to God's laws. They were doing what was right in their own eyes. That's what the world's doing today. The world is doing what's right in their own eyes. If it makes you feel good, keeps you happy, that's okay. Gideon and Deborah and many others in the book of Judges, they were not content to do what everyone else was doing, everything that was right in their own eyes. But they stepped up and they became judges of the nation of Israel and gave political and spiritual leadership in their day. And then, of course, there was David, who was not content to stay in the trench while everyone else decided to remain in what they viewed as their safe zone. David was not content to join them in the trench and to hide from the giant that challenged them in the battlefield. And even though David was not the perfect person when it comes to someone who claims to be a servant of God, yet the Bible calls him a friend of God. Even though, and we sang about it there this morning too, even though God saw his failures and God saw his weaknesses, he became a friend of God. And friends, you can stand out and stand apart from the crowd and from the world and from your community. Not to be someone who's just different for the sake of being different, but because you know that God has created you with purpose. And you know that the God that you serve has given you the choice to serve him, to follow him, or even to walk away from him, if that's your choice. No, friends, we're not robots. We're not holograms. These people knew that they were created by God and called to follow and to serve him. And I want to say to you this morning that when we look at who we are and what we are in this church, on this planet, in the life that God has given to us, in a relationship as Christians with each other and with the Christ that we serve and to follow, I want to say to you this morning that we are not robots, we're not holograms. We're not the descendants of intergalactic bacteria. We're not the descendants of ancestors that crawled out of some primordial mud soup. And we're not the product of evolution. It's one of the most racist theories on the planet. They hide it. They hide it. Hitler was an evolutionist. That's why Hitler turned into Jews and other people groups, even disabled people. This is about the survival of the fittest, evolution teaches. And it's about preserving the most favored of races. You get put in jail today if you stood up and said something like that, and rightly so. Because evolution is saying that the whites are the most favored of the races. And yet there are those who want us to buy into this whole theory of evolution. No, friends, we are none of these things. But we're created in the image of God to reflect him and to know him and to fellowship with him. That's the bit that I absolutely, totally love, and I'm amazed at that even today. That God has created us on purpose and with purpose and created us to know him, to fellowship with him, and also to reflect him. I want to finish in a moment. Worship team, you can come to the platform. I want to finish by simply asking you the question today. When we think of this Creator, he's not asking you to prove who you are by clicking on a few little photographs on a computer screen or on your phone. He's simply asking you to recognize who you are as part of his creation, and that God has created you on purpose and with purpose. And God is reaching out to you as part of his creation to relate and connect with you. He wants to know you personally. I want to encourage you, friends, this morning to know him. For those in this place, and there are many here who do know him, I want to encourage you today to show that. If you know him, then show that in your lifestyle. Reflect him. Let the choices you make reflect him. When you're going through some stuff, hey, get people to pray for you and encourage you and so on. But reflect him. Jesus came that he might reveal the Father to the nation of Israel and to the world. We have been called to be those who will show the Father to our communities, to our nation. So we're to live as those who reflect him and who reveal Christ and show Christ within us as we follow him. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. If you don't know him, then I finish with this, friends. Jesus Christ said that he came to show the Father to us, to reveal the Father to us, that you might know him. But he also says this, he didn't give us a religious route to get into the Father. Humanity's done that. We've done that ourselves. Jesus has stood in front of us, and he presents himself to us with these words: I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. I want to encourage you, if you don't know Jesus Christ this morning, get to know him. Otherwise, you're going to be caught up in all of this other nonsense. Get to know him and get to know the God who created you and walk with him. Because you do that in this life, you'll do that then in all eternity. And that's the great hope that we have for this life and for the life beyond.